Hi guys, it's Angie with Fun Endeavors Tie-Dye Lab. Today let's make a geode halter top. I had a custom request for a geode style halter top, and so let's give it a try. I'm starting by using a washable marker, and I'm going to make a mark kind of where I'd like for the center of this geode to be. That's not going to be the actual geode shape, but it will let me keep tabs on where I want the center to be as I'm tying the rest of the shirt. I'm going to pinch one layer of the fabric, lift this shirt or halter top up off of the table, and then I'm going to slide my hand down to the bottom of the shirt, and that's where I'm going to start tying. I generally like the way and the shape that geodes look when I tie from the outside going in toward the center. You know, one of the biggest complaints I hear all the time from people tying geodes is that they look too perfect. They look too much like bullseyes. They're very round. And that happens when you start tying from the center going out a lot more than when you start at the outside and tie in. Because as I'm starting at the outside and I'm tying in, I'm really trying to keep my fabric messy. I'm not trying to make it perfect, straightened out. I want to rough it up. I want to grab little areas of it and kind of push it under my sinew. Just keep it as random as possible. Honestly, the messier you are with your fabric when you're tying your geodes, the better they look, because it gives like little folded areas and just some unusual shapes in the geode. Just trust me, don't be perfect when you're tying them. It also looks better if you vary the distance between your lines of sinew. And I'm using sinew because sinew's wax coated. So wherever I tie one of these sinew lines and I tighten it down a lot, it will kind of lock in on itself and not allow the dye underneath that area. So that's going to be a defined line. When I get out to the center of the geode, you can do the center of the geode in any kind of way you want to. You can make it just one single center, or you can actually take your sinew, kind of divide your fabric, and run a sinew line down through the middle of the fabric. That will make multiple centers in the middle of your geode. I also like to take and kind of push that end fabric down inside. That way it kind of makes some unusual shapes in the center of the geode. I'm going to divide mine in two areas, and then after I tie one side, I'm going to wind the sinew back down and tie the other side before I cut the sinew off. Once I've tied the entire shirt, I'm going to go ahead and straighten it out so that I think it's a little bit easier to dye when it's laying as flat as possible. And then I'm going to place this shirt aside and I'm going to allow it to dry out completely. I get better color saturation when I apply the dye to a thick fold like this when it's completely dry. I have a blog post out on my website with a little more information about that topic, and I have a link to my website down below this video in the description. The color request for this shirt was blue, purple, pink, orange, and yellow. So pretty much the rainbow minus the green. For my setup, I have a plastic tote and I have a metal rack down inside of the tote. And I'm going to place the shirt on top of the rack, and then I'm going to use some silicone cake molds, which I'm going to attach together, wrap around the shirt, and then I'm going to hold them up close to the shirt by attaching some wooden clothespins to my metal rack. I have links for the silicone cake molds and most of the other items that I use when I tie-dye down below this video in the description. Since the shirt is completely dry, I've got some soda ash solution inside of the spray bottle, and I'm going to lightly spray the top of the shirt. That will help the dye to stick a little bit better to the top. So to apply the dye, I'm going to apply the dye pretty randomly on this shirt. I'm going to add dye on the sinew lines, I'm going to add dye between the sinew lines, in the sections, and I'm going to split the sections, put multiple colors of dye in each section. I want to really layer the dye on this shirt because I want it to have some depth. So for the most part, all the colors that I've chosen work really well together. However, the one color that I have which could pose a problem on the shirt are the oranges, because orange, when it's mixed with blues or mixed with purples, it tends to kind of give a little bit of brown, and I don't want that on this shirt. So the first colors that I'm going to apply are the yellows and oranges and pinks, because those three colors work really well together. So I want to try to make sure I keep the oranges kind of almost protected from the purples and the blues. I want to put orange down, and then I want to either put a yellow or a pink on the side of it where it is not right up next to a purple or a blue. So I'm going to apply those colors first, and I'm going to add most of the colors to multiple areas on the shirt. So let me tell you all the colors that I'm using. I'm using sky blue, plum blossom, plum, lilac, tangerine, orange sorbet, daffodil, and marigold, which are Dharma Trading Company colors. I'm also using ice dye blue, blue pervinca, royal purple, 80s pink, apricot blush, which are all dye spin colors. Then I'm going to use strawberry from Custom Colors and golden pineapple from Pro Chemical and Dye. This is obviously not the order that I'm using them in, and I have them all listed below if you missed one of the colors that I'm using. If you'll notice, I'm applying quite a bit of dye, and the reason for that is because I am doing this so randomly, I will not have the ability to turn this shirt over and add more dye on the other side. It would be very difficult to try to repeat this dye pattern on the other side of the shirt. So I'm going to add quite a bit of dye, and then I'm just going to keep adding layers of ice to force the dye down through the shirt until the shirt is well saturated. So once I have all the dye on the shirt, I'm going to go ahead and add an additional sprinkle of dry soda ash over the top, and then I'm going to add on the ice. The first layer of ice is nugget ice, which I get when I shop at either Whole Foods or Sprouts. Then after the first layer of ice melted, I came back. As I expected, there was a lot of undissolved dye left on top, so I went ahead and added a second layer of ice. And this time, the ice that I used were some larger cubes that I make in silicone ice molds. I allowed that second layer of ice to melt, and I could have added a third layer if I needed to, but the dye had gone through to the other side of the shirt really well. So I went ahead and took this shirt, placed it inside of a container with a lid, and I allowed the shirt to process outside in the heat for about 24 hours before I rinsed it. Normally I leave the shirts for about 48 hours before I rinse them, but because it is so hot, they really don't need to process that long. The higher the temperature is, the less processing time you need. I know every year a chart goes around out on Facebook which kind of tells you how long you need to leave a shirt depending upon the temperature. So you can probably find that out on one of the Facebook tie-dye groups. But for me, I usually leave them at least 24 hours, and that's about what I left this shirt, maybe a little bit more. To rinse the shirt, I took it to my utility sink, and as you can see, it is really well saturated. I started rinsing in cold water to rinse out the soda ash. After I rinsed in cold for a while, I went ahead and warmed the water up to hot and continued rinsing in hot water to try to rinse out the excess dye that didn't bond with the fabric. I also went ahead and untied the shirt, and then instead of rinsing for a long time, I went ahead and ran some really hot water in my utility sink, placed the shirt inside along with a little bit of Blue Dawn dish soap, and allowed the shirt to soak. When the water cooled off, I changed it out, and I continued that soaking process until my water was remaining almost clear. Then I placed the shirt along with some Dharma's professional textile detergent into my washing machine, and I washed it using a hot water cycle. Okay, so the shirt is completely done. It's been washed, dried, and ironed, and let's see what it looks like. Okay, so what do you guys think? I think this one turned out really pretty. It is super vibrant and it's very colorful. So in general, whenever you use yellow, it tends to kind of almost get eaten up by other colors because it is such a light color. So I really used a lot of yellow, hoping to have some remaining on this shirt. And I do have hints of yellow, which I'm very happy with. The one color that kind of disappears on this one is the pink. And pink is kind of the same way. When you ice dye with pink and you use other colors, sometimes pink can be kind of finicky about ice dye. It doesn't always work great, but I used a couple colors that I've had good success with ice dyeing. So there are hints of pink, but there's not as much pink as I used on this shirt. It just kind of got consumed by some of the other colors, the oranges and the purples. Orange is kind of one of those colors that, for me, really no matter how little of the orange I use, it always shows up. It tends to be more of an overpowering color. So some of these things are things to keep in mind when you do rainbow shirts or shirts that contain like orange and pink and yellow. Like I said, orange tends to be an overpowering color, so I usually try to use less of that. Pink tends to be a more mild color, so I try to use more of that, and definitely more yellow because I think everything eats up the yellow. Everything blends with yellow. The blue isn't super prominent on this shirt either. It too kind of blends with the purples and just kind of adds in with that. So the blue blended with the purples and with the pinks. As far as this shirt goes in general, this is a double layer halter top, which I purchased from Old Navy. And I think it dyed up really, really well. It's 95% cotton and 5% spandex. The spandex part won't dye, but the cotton part will, and it ended up being super vibrant and really pretty. So I really love the way this halter top turned out, but what do you guys think? Please drop me some comments down below and let me know. And if you've enjoyed the video, I sure would appreciate it if you would like it, and if you'd subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you'll hit the bell, you'll receive a notification whenever I upload a new video. Thank you all for watching, and I hope you have a great day.